And good evening. Welcome to Future Focus. I'm your host, Elwood Robinson, Chancellor at Winston-Salem State University, and I'm delighted to be with you on this Tuesday. If it's Tuesday night, it must be Future Focus now. Thanks for joining us today for a very important conversation. Tonight's conversation is about Winston-Salem. It's about looking at the history of this city and this area and this region. It's about the part that Winston-Salem State University plays or has played in this city for over 128 years. This city has gone through a lot. It has seen so many things, and at each point in time, this city has been able to reimagine itself, to be able to think about itself differently. And that's important because more so than ever before, these are times in which we have to reimagine ourselves. We have to think differently about how we operate. And we have today a very important guest that's going to help us think about that. We have with us today Mark Owens, and Mark is the president and CEO of Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. Those of you who've been in Winston-Salem for many years probably have not heard of Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. And you probably say, what is that? But you know Mark Owens. You know Mark Owens because he was president of the Winston-Salem Chamber. That's how you know him. You know him because he came to this city in 2017. He came with the spirit and the energy to help us rethink and reimagine this city. When I came to Winston-Salem in 2015, this city was right in the middle of reimagining itself. It said it was a city of arts and innovation. And we said, if it's going to be a city of arts and innovation, then we want to be a part of that. So we set about at Winston-Salem State to make sure that we were in lockstep with the vision that everyone had for this great city. Well, this is going to be a great conversation tonight. We're going to talk about a lot of different things that are happening in our economy today, things that are happening to our businesses today, and things that are happening to our citizens because of this pandemic. And no better person that I can think of to talk about the impact that this is having on our city. That's Mark Owens. Let's bring Mark Owens in and introduce Mark to everyone tonight. Mark.
Thank you, Chancellor. It's such an honor to be here with you on Future Focus now, and what a wonderful introduction. Appreciate that very much, and appreciate you being a board member of Greater Winston-Salem Inc. as we rebrand our chamber and look forward to the future. And it's really fitting to what we're going to talk about tonight, and appreciate your partnership and excited to have this conversation.
We're glad you're here. And so one of the things right off the bat, before we get the conversation going, Mark, it is 2015, 2016. You're somewhere else. We won't say where you are. But then you start looking at Winston-Salem. And what was it about Winston-Salem that got your attention that said, I want to be a part of what's going on there? It had to be something. I'm curious as to what that was.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it kind of started with Lowe's Foods. Helped Lowe's Foods open a store in my previous community, and got to know a little bit about Winston-Salem there. And when we came on a visit, what really made it special was that walking down the street, people, is a diverse community downtown, and people greeted you and said hello and asked, how are you doing? And they had no idea that we were in town looking to potentially move here. My wife was pregnant. Everybody just treated us so nicely. And I just remember that feeling of hospitality, and that feeling of it felt like home. So my what really made it stick, Chancellor, was in between my first and second interview, our little son was born. And he was born, and we had to be back in 3 days for an interview. And I called and I said, he's great, but he had a little something they needed to monitor right after he was born. And I called and I said, look, I can't be there on Monday for the second interview. And the board and that search group said, look, we'll see you in 4 to 6 weeks. We'll hold the process. You're right where you need to be. And if you weren't there with your family, we'd be concerned about it. And from that moment on, I knew that Winston-Salem was a community that we wanted to be here and raise our little 2.5-year-old boy. So excited to be here. And Chancellor, the other thing is, my first purchase in Winston-Salem was from the bookstore when you walked me in and showed me right where the good Rams t-shirts were. And I still wear it all the time. So
I
wear it
forgot
all,
about
walking
that,
around
Mark.
all the time. Yeah.
I forgot
My,
about that. When people come to Winston-Salem, they have to come to Winston-Salem State. And
that's
so
right.
I knew you were here. And so that's I had forgot about that. Thanks for reminding me about that. That was pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Came over to visit, and it was one of my first visits there, and first day or two in the community, and went straight to the bookstore. And I came to visit with you, and you walked me right over to the bookstore. Before I left, I had to make sure I had some gear, so I wear it proudly.
Yeah. So you have to tell people if they come on our campus, they can't leave without some paraphernalia. And they
That's
can't
right.
leave without purchasing something when they come on campus. Thanks so much for that, Mark. So you're coming to Winston-Salem and you're coming to be a part of the Chamber of Commerce. Give us just a kind of a quick thumbnail kind of version. What is the Chamber of Commerce? Because I want to get into the new organization a little bit, but let's start with the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, and Chancellor, I talked a lot about the personal side of our decision, but on the chamber side, we're a business organization, been around for 137 years. And when we were looking at Winston-Salem and the community, the Winston-Salem Chamber, as we formerly were called, was in before Winston-Salem became one city, and it was two different cities, and it had the idea of togetherness. And when we were looking at Winston-Salem to move, I just saw this new chapter that's being written in our community. People are reimagining we're taking steps forward. You have so much amazing growth happening. Our downtown is growing. We've got new businesses starting, growing, expanding, locating. It was an exciting time. And so as a chamber, we're made up of we're a business membership organization. We have about 1,100 businesses that are members of our organization. We did just recently launch Greater Winston-Salem Inc. when we changed our name and our consolidation for economic recruitment April 2nd. So we didn't know we'd be launching a new organization and brand virtually, but we're doing our best. But our organization has helped in different ways over our history, and to try to make sure that we're looking ahead. Where are we going as a community, and how do we support our businesses of all sizes and make sure that they succeed as best they can?
Oh, fantastic. And that's great. And so when you were being recruited, and I did a little research, and when you were coming to Winston-Salem, and I found a quote here. Let me see if this quote fits you. And it says, in Mark Owens, we have found a dynamic leader at the helm who will bring years of experience and a fresh perspective to Winston-Salem. Is that you, Mark?
Wow. I mean, Chancellor, I like to say that I bring a perspective, but mostly what we look for and what I strive on in terms of my leadership is style is a team effort. And when we rebranded and when I got here, we launched the tagline together. And that idea was not just to say this is what we want to be, but it's a charge, and we need to do that. We need to, in every way possible, we need to come together as a community and find ways to thrive in what we're doing. And I think by living in other areas of the Southeast and getting to see other cities that have done things well and some that have some things to improve on and continue to grow. I thought my perspective would come and be able to help look at things a little bit differently with the fresh perspective, and then also kind of continue to push our community to come together more, because we didn't know this was coming with this pandemic, but we knew that when we do things together, our community has a history of succeeding when we do that for many, many reasons. And I think that was what I felt like it was time for us to do again, is to come together and take that next step in our history and our transition.
Fantastic. Oftentimes, when you go to a place and you have some sense about what the place is like, you learn a lot more once you get here. So you come to Winston-Salem and you've been here for a year. What are some of the things that jump out at you once you've been here for 6 months to a year?
Yeah, I think what jumped out at me a little bit more than I expected was that really you can be anywhere in our community in 15 or 20 minutes. And I think that's a positive thing. I think that is really something that's pretty easy. I think when people that are from here think about it, traffic, we don't have traffic. I mean, look at other places. We're a great community, but we also have you walk down the street and we're a diverse community. We have people from all backgrounds, all geographical backgrounds, get to meet people from all over the country that have chose to make Winston-Salem home. But what really stuck out to me was that people look after each other, and I didn't expect. I think there's room to improve. We don't get to visit places across the community as much as we should. We all need to continue to improve on that. We need to make sure we realize that, we live in neighborhoods and that we are one community. And we need to make sure of that, whether it's in Innovation Quarter, whether it's in East Winston, on the south side of our community. We all come together for things, we can do things better. So I would say I was one of the things that I was surprised about the most, Chancellor, was that after 6 months or so, still meeting people that I had never gotten to meet. And in other communities, you felt like that was a little smaller. And here, with our size, it feels even bigger because we have a lot of people that care and a lot of people that are involved right away. And that really jumped out to me.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, when I came here in 2015, I was pleasantly surprised at the city of Winston-Salem. I knew about Winston-Salem growing up in North Carolina, but I didn't really know it. And you can't know a place until you go and you actually live there. But one of the things that you just talked about in this city, it is, in my opinion, a 20-minute city, which means that I think, pretty comfortably you can get to anywhere in Winston-Salem in about 20 minutes. That's simply not the case in most cities in America, and it's not the case with most cities in North Carolina. I still have a residence in Durham, and Durham has grown immensely. Durham and Wake County, now over 1 million plus people trafficking every day, trying to get somewhere. It's very, very difficult. And I remember when I got here, wanting apprehensive about leaving the university. I stayed about 15 minutes from campus, and I didn't know, Mark, what time to leave campus. So I said, well, I'll leave somewhere, maybe 5:30, 6, maybe 6:30, maybe traffic could have died down. So then what happened one day, I had to leave at 4:30. I said, oh, I'm in trouble. And there was not a whole lot of traffic. It was one day I said, oh, I had to leave at 5. I said, I know I'm in trouble now. And there wasn't a lot of traffic. And then one day I had to leave at 5:30 and there wasn't a lot of traffic. So I got to the point that I said, there just isn't a lot of traffic in Winston-Salem. And you hear people talk about the traffic in Winston-Salem, but I can tell you that it's not. I think that's one of the best kept secrets about Winston-Salem. And I like to keep it that way because when people start finding out, Mark, you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen? They're going to start saying, this is a place that I want to go. And I agree with you. It has been said, Mark, I don't know whether you agree with this or not, that Winston-Salem has, big town amenities and a small town kind of culture. Like, what is that? And what do you think people mean by that?
Yeah, I've heard that, and I agree with it. And a good example is our Director of Government Affairs, Calvin McCrae, one of our great team members in our office, moved his family here from DC. And for him, he said, look, there's a lot of things to do here in Winston-Salem, but you can also walk down the street and see people you can walk into your favorite restaurant and people remember you, and that there's a politeness, if you will, a hospitality angle that is here in our community, and that allows for us to have that charm. My wife messes with me sometimes because I put on a shirt or something to go to the grocery store, and she's like, "Why are you doing that?" I'm like, "I'm going to run into somebody I know. I can't have holes in my yard T-shirt that I'm working out in." So, I think that's a part of it that I've really enjoyed is you can be in the hustle bustle of downtown, and within 15 minutes you can have some space. You can be outside, you can be at Salem Lake, you can have all these amenities that are great for that feel of a community. And I think sometimes there's a difference between a city and a community, and I really believe we have the community part, which is important.
Yeah. And one of the things that Mark, and you've been around me for a while, and I'm always telling the Winston-Salem State University story. But you also know that I'm also telling the story about making sure that we can have a high quality of life for all of the citizens in Winston-Salem. And you and I know, and a lot of people know, there's a lot of inequities in this city. And we work every day to try to reduce those and remove those inequities tell us a little bit about, your role, the chamber, and how you are thinking about or trying to address some of these issues.
Yeah, Chancellor, and our community is so appreciative of your leadership and, of course, Winston-Salem State's leadership in this issue right here. It's something that we have to talk about. And I think it was one of the things I mentioned in my first kind of address to the business community at my first event is that we have a economic mobility issue. And what we kind of need to do is talk about it first and foremost and acknowledge it and find ways that we can improve that. So some things that we've done that I'm really proud about in our organization is we've continued and built on and reshaped our minority business scholarship. We've created this pool of dollars that allow for businesses free membership into our organization. That also comes with financial coaching, access to other resources, special interviews with our lenders, our banks, making sure that people have access, most importantly. We partner with the Access Center and Innovation Quarter. We named that Minority Business Scholarship after our first African American chairman, Mr. Richard Davis. And it just was so exciting to get to make that call to him and explain and have him come join us was just amazing feeling. We just recently launched a small business grant and partnered with the Winston-Salem Foundation. And that grant has a significant weight towards businesses owned and operated by people of color. And we need to make sure that we are supporting everyone. And really, Chancellor, when we use the tagline together, that's where I mentioned the charge. It's not just a saying, but we need to have something that we strive to reach and that we aspire to. And for us, using that word has been our driving force to really focus on our economic mobility, our economic inequality that we have, and making sure that people visit businesses all across geographically our community, and that's been really important. I'm proud of our work. We have a lot more to do, but I think we're starting to really build relationships and trust, and that's so important that we can continue to grow on.
Yeah, and I think that we have to continue to build in those areas. So when I think about, what's going to happen after the pandemic, when I think about what's happening even now, even before that, one of the mantras that I've always had is really about equity and making sure that we can provide access to minority businesses, access to individuals who don't have the kind of resources, sometimes don't have the kind of startup funds, to make sure that small businesses and minority businesses are really kind of taking, make sure that we look out for them. Because I know one of the things that we talked about primarily with during the last 2 months and the last 45 days in particular was how hard businesses had been hit. And I am fearful, Mark, that a lot of the minority businesses won't survive. And we have to make sure that we pay attention to those businesses. I know that's been part of the conversation. I've listened to that part of that conversation. I'm going to continue to say, I'm going to push in that direction as well. Talk to me a little bit about how we're trying to protect the minority businesses.
It's crucial, and you're right. And I'm just, to be very honest and blunt here, I'm very worried about it. I think it's something that we all need to consider the severity of what that would do to our community for businesses, all businesses, but especially our minority-owned businesses. You've done, as a university, such a great job with what Carol Davis has led at the Enterprise Center and being able to help us start businesses. So, Chancellor, just to your point, as we look at these small business grants, for an example, and we've been so thankful from the Winston-Salem Foundation, some other companies like Wells Fargo, and some private individuals. We just announced this grant program. And out of the $200,000 that we announced with, and we're going to hopefully raise a lot more, because it's going to need a lot more than that. So if you don't mind me plugging on your show, winstonsalem.com, you can find out a way to contribute. And this is a fund that will help our small businesses. Out of that $200,000 that have been contributed, at least $135,000 of those are designated for businesses owned and operated by people of color. And it's really important for us to make sure that that money is designated, not only weighted for the decision, but at least that amount out of that, and that percentage is going to go to businesses owned and operated by people of color. So those grant applications are open. And the need is there, Chancellor. We had our grant announced Friday afternoon. And as of when I came on the show with you tonight, 104 people have applied for that grant already, which is a $5,000 grant. It's not that much money, but what it is aimed to do is it's aimed to help those restaurants or those businesses get to reopen and get over that last little order or that last hump in order to get reopened and hopefully get a shot in the arm to continue to make it. But it's not going to be something that if we just focus on for a month or 2 months or 3 months, we're going to need to focus on this in perpetuity as we go forward and support our businesses. What I'm worried about, honestly, Chancellor, is let's say everything gets better. And here we are in September, October, and people start going back and forgetting about supporting our local businesses. There's still going to be that gap and some of that rebuild that is still needed for our business community. So it's really important. And one of those things that we're working on is try to make sure people know where the businesses are, how can you support them, how can you order online and pick up your goods and really keep those dollars local. It's really vital for what we're doing.
Yeah. Mark, how can we tell that story? I mean, I think that's a great story. I mean, you just mentioned about the grant. I think it came out last week. How can we tell that story? That's important. And better yet, I'm interested in the energy behind that. What were some of the drivers behind making sure that a large percentage of that fund went to minority businesses, particularly minority businesses of color?
Yeah, the conversation kind of started with the Downtown Winston-Salem Partnership and our organization saying, we need to identify businesses that are really part of the fabric of our community. And we had some leaders in our downtown area and others get together. And really the Winston-Salem Foundation helped us really kickstart that. And to be very honest, when we looked at it, my favorite restaurant in town by far is Sweet Potatoes. It's my favorite place to go. And we looked at somewhere like Miss Ora's or Sweet Potatoes. We talked about Forsyth Seafood being such a critical part of our community, and there's so many others. But those restaurants, we said, what would it be like if we didn't have just some of those restaurants anymore? Would we still feel like the Winston-Salem we described earlier in the conversation? Would we still feel that? And the answer was no. We wouldn't feel the same type of community feel and that same character that we described what we like about our community. So the Winston-Salem Foundation, Scott Weirman and his team, Randall Tuttle as the chair, they really led that. And they said, look, part of our charge as the Winston-Salem Foundation is economic mobility and helping be more equitable and following your lead, Chancellor. And I think that they launched us with the $75,000 grant. And they said that money is designed for businesses owned and operated by people of color. That was the wording that their committee and their board chose. And then our business community and some of our individuals have followed on and said, we believe in that and we're putting our money here to support it. So we haven't really even made that many asks yet. And people have latched on and said, we realize how important diversity is in our community, but also for our business community, so that we have that character, that feel, that small town charm, the big businesses as well, all of it. It's so important. And it makes up truly what I said about the fabric of our community. It wouldn't be the same. And we just can't allow that to happen.
Yeah, one of the things you think about, and particularly during these times, is who is with you and who are your partners. And you just mentioned the Winston-Salem Foundation. When you're in the midst of a crisis, I mean, you're trying to figure out, who's going to help you and who's going to be there for you, and what have you learned during this, Mark? Because if you think about where we are today, and then what's going to happen, we'll talk a little bit about this a little bit later. Um, you need to make sure that people are committed to helping you get through this crisis. What have you learned, and who has stood out, or a couple things that have stood out in your mind as to say, I'm glad I'm in Winston-Salem, and I'm glad I have these partners to help us to kind of get through this crisis? I know we'll talk a little bit about healthcare in a minute, but I know I've got just a great healthcare system. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Chancellor, I don't know how much time we have left on here to be able to talk about everybody. But what I would say is that I think what I realized here is that the relationships that we were building in good times were fruitful in the time of need. And I think with that, when we're having those conversations in the conference rooms and the meetings, and we're talking about equity, and it's something that, as you mentioned, you talk about all the time, and it's something that keep it on the forefront of our conversation. Well, then you see our leaders like the Winston-Salem Foundation step up and say, hey, it's time for us to jump in, and we're going to do that. I get to serve on the Kate B. Reynolds Foundation board, the charitable trust, the local advisory part of that. That's been a group that I've seen step up with dollars. But I also would just say that, there's been some folks that personally reach out, to be able to come on and talk to you has been really impactful. The amount of just little text or calls that some of our community members will shoot you and say, hey, we're supporting you, keep going, we need you guys right now, support our businesses. Our Visit Winston-Salem team has been incredible through that as well. Tourism is a big part of our community, and this has hit our hospitality and tourism industry really hard. I think I saw a report come through that, for example, Marriott's down 92% in revenue right now. I mean, and that's not here, Marriott as a company, but it's impactful. But to see our community say, look, we believe in our message, we're going to get through this, and we're going to rebound behind after this gets out of here, I think that's been really important. Dr. Graham, your provost, sent a nice note, just say, look, we're in this together, and Winston-Salem State's here with you, and we're gonna keep pushing. It's those little comments that a lot of people don't get the opportunity to talk about. That is what makes me, feel like this is a great place, and that we're gonna get out of this faster and stronger than a lot of other communities because of that.
Great. Let's pivot just a moment, because I'm at Winston-Salem State University, so I'm certainly in higher ed. And when I think about Winston-Salem, and I talk a little bit about this in terms of the diversity of higher ed institutions, I mean, some of the best in the country, some of the best in the world, but certainly very diverse. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the higher ed community and how they have impacted, small business development, how they've impacted the economy, and because you interact with all of them in some regard, and you're doing some unique things with Foresight Tech. And so just talk a little bit about the higher ed community, what that ecosystem is like, and how it is important to the Winston-Salem economy.
Chancellor, it's a great point. And I think it's you talked about the hidden gem of our community, that story about the traffic. Well, to me, higher ed is that story that just people don't talk about enough for our community. We have 6 very unique universities and colleges. And what I think is so special about it is that they're all different and bring so much to the table. If it was 6 of the same type of universities and colleges, I don't think it would be as special as it is. So one of my favorite days on the job, to be very honest, was when all 6 of our chancellors or presidents were on the stage at one time. And then somebody afterwards came up and said, we don't think that's ever been done before. And I was just floored by that. And to see the relationships that you and our other presidents and chancellors have with each other really struck me, because there's already a network, an ecosystem. You see things like Foresight Tech partnering with you and transfer programs. You've got UNCSA, you've got Salem College, Piedmont International doing some amazing things with online learning and criminal justice. So those have been great. And then Wake Forest, and see the partnerships that are starting to continue to build there between all of the universities has been really exciting. I think the impact, so many of our higher ed students are coming to work in our community. I think it was the report showed Winston-Salem State was the #1 university of the 6 that their graduates are staying and impacting our local economy. And it's providing. That's right.
You got to say that again, Mark.
#1 in economic impact and impacting our local business. I know you guys keep ranking #1 a lot. I got to remember them all. It's tough, but I will say that, the impact, not only from, people graduating and starting a business, which is crucial, but it's also, going to work into our existing industries when we talk to companies looking to move here or companies that are here and wanting to grow, the number one question is talent. Is there talent that I can bring on? And it's not talent just to do a certain job. It's talent that can come in with the hunger and desire to learn and grow. And our higher education institutions are cultivating that. And I think that is something that can't be understated. And we need to tell that story even more. So it's something that we've put out in a talent attraction video where we featured your viral graduation video. One of the many is in there. So we're utilizing that storytelling aspect. But it's really important, and it's also exciting when you see our athletic programs supporting each other and bringing an energy to the community. It just makes it come to life. And I think when you guys have homecoming and our businesses are full with your alumni back, that's support too. I mean, there's a lot of many ways that our institutions play a big role.
Yeah, I mean and I agree with you. I mean, you talk about the higher ed ecosystem. It's probably not another ecosystem that is as diverse as we have here in Winston-Salem. And I talk a lot about the Winston-Salem State University, but I also talk a lot about the ecosystem because I think it's so amazing. And I agree with you. And you talked about, what it brings to the region and what it brings to the culture of this city. We talked, and you mentioned homecoming. Homecoming at Winston-Salem State University is one of the largest events in the state. It brings more people to an event. It's probably in the top 5. It could be in the top 3 in the number of people who come and support this university, but also spend dollars in this city, in this economy. So it's a big lift for this city when we have homecoming. We talked about the great things that are happening in Winston-Salem, the culture. You know that we're currently, the CIAA champions.
Oh, I know that.
2020,
That's a
we're
big deal.
2020 champions, right? And that's important because people embrace these universities. People embrace Winston-Salem State University, particularly athletic wise. The history, the tradition in this city, I mean, goes back to the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and athletics at Winston-Salem State was what brought people together. And people now, when I travel around this city, you as well probably, they're always saying, talk about Earl Monroe, and they'll talk about big house games, and they'll talk about the great things that are happening at Winston-Salem State. We have to continue to tell that story. I tell folks I have you on my show, and so I'm gonna say it live to you. You have been a great supporter of Winston-Salem State. We started tonight's conversation about you going in and buying a T-shirt on our campus, but you continue to tell the story. When we start having promos about this city, you always call me. You always say, "Take a look at this. I'm looking." To make sure that Winston-Salem State is well represented, and we thank you for that.
I appreciate that, but it's really a thank you to you guys for all that you do. I mean, I just get to help tell the story a little bit and be a supporter. I will say I'm going to have to ask for a special favor because that basketball gym fills up so fast. I'm gonna have to see if you can get me a ticket next season, Chancellor, to get in. I think you should get sellouts and turning the fans around. But one of my favorite nights also has been, when the Red Sea of Sound and the Wake Forest performed at the Wake Forest game, and I made sure to be there that night, and just to see a community come together around music and around the culture and the history and legacy of the schools was really inspiring. And I think those kind of things, as a former athlete a long time ago, the game brings people together, and it's exciting to get to see that. And I'm proud to be a Winston-Salem supporter. My college roommate's brother is an alum of your great university, so I've known about it for a long time, and glad to have quite a few pieces of gear from your store now.
Yeah, well, that's great. I know you were a former soccer player, right? Were you a
That's
soccer
right.
player, Mark?
Yeah, I stopped growing, so basketball was out of the picture. So I played goalkeeper in the soccer on the soccer team in college. So it worked out for me, but basketball is my first love for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so that's no, that's great. I don't know about the ticket to the game center though. I mean, that's a tough ticket. What I hope is that we get back to playing basketball in the game center. Who knows when that's going to happen? But if it
That's
does,
right.
you can rest assured. You can rest assured that you're going to get a ticket to be a part of that experience. It is nothing like it anywhere in America to be in the game center for a college basketball game. It is as good as it gets, sir. We'll make sure that you're there.
Well, I did go to one incognito, and it was full by the time I got there. So I know now next time to call ahead and get there early. So I'll do that.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Mark, let's get into in the time to have left. We got a couple more segments, but I really want to get into you guys, what you do is you do economic forecasting. I know it's not a science, I know, but we have to start preparing. We have to start thinking about the economy and what it looks like. And I know it shifts and changes, every day. If I talk to you next week, it might be different. But talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing, what you're feeling, and any kind of forecasting that you might give us about what's happening in the local economy.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's something that is an inexact science, as you mentioned, but comes from a lot of conversations, a lot of reading about the data and just talking to our business community and seeing what's happening. Obviously right now it goes without saying it's unprecedented times. We never knew this was coming. And to see people be resilient and strong and fight through it, I've been really surprised and positively surprised that we haven't had as many business closures as we thought we would have so far. And I think that's a testament to our community going and getting takeout, a startup company, Swipe By, that helps make ordering from to go from your favorite restaurant easy. Launched here and now is worldwide, really, especially all across the country and helping small businesses. But I've been really impressed of our community pulling together to support our folks. What I do think we'll see from this is a change in the working environment. I think office space is going to be a conversation that we're going to have a lot of talk around. Are people going to still want open office spaces? Are people going to want to go back to more traditional closed walls and having their individual space? I think consumer confidence when people are walking into restaurants, into retail, is going to drive decision making. So I think if your store is safe and clean, more people are going to want to come to your store. I do think we have a challenge to face on the online world, and people can now have everything delivered to your door. And I think our small businesses are going to have a harder time fighting for those dollars when people are thinking about, can I order it, or do I need to go out and find that good or service? I think some of the areas that we've been reading about as Site Selectors Guild, the Association of the Leading Location Advisors for Economic Development, put out a study. The number one industry that is anticipated to rebound after this pandemic is the biotech, life sciences industry, and that is the medical industry that is searching for cures for things that are happening in Innovation Quarter, things that your students are doing in the nursing programs and the pre-med programs and things of that nature, in the science labs. Those industries are going to really grow. And we have a cluster of that in Winston-Salem. And we have an area like Innovation Quarter and two major health systems that really can make us prime for growth out of this. I do think there will be another kind of wave in distribution. We're seeing a lot of interest in food distribution, especially. So where people were having a distribution center that was maybe 250,000 square feet distributing out of one location, if that goes down and something happens there, or there's a sickness, then you can't continue your business. So people are looking at smaller ones that are spread out into different communities. And so we've seen a big uptick of that lately, of the distribution logistics industry as well. I think the one area that my biggest question mark is what is the future of office work? Are people going to still come to the office? Are people going to be working remote more often? What does this do to our our hotel industry. Are people going to still travel, a flight and an overnight for a 1.5 hour, 2 hour in-person meeting and go back? Or are they going to move to virtual meetings like this? I think that's a big question, but I also think people are not ever going to take for granted the personal interaction anymore either. The ability to get to see someone and shake a hand, or maybe the handshake goes away. I mean, there's a lot of things we don't know, but there has to be some sort, in my opinion, that human connection that makes a difference. And I think our community is primed to be able to excel out of this because we've been able to minimalize it. Our community is did the city initiative, which your folks helped with today from the athletic department, and taking care of our senior population in the community by providing masks. We take care of each other. I think we are going to come out of this stronger. We're going to lose businesses. Unemployment rate's going to spike. It is spiking. But I think out of that, you used a word earlier about reimagining who we are. I think people are going to become entrepreneurial and start some new businesses. And how can we wrap our arms around those folks that are looking to create their own path forward going, from here on? And so I think those are some of the areas that I see a lot of positivity for us, but we also, we got to make sure we number one, play defense and protect the ones that we already have as much as we can. And then also look to add to our team in our community by getting some other companies to move here.
Great. Well, generally, I know you're not a psychologist. I'm a psychologist, but I'm going to ask you to play psychologist. What's your general feeling of the mood of the city right now?
That's a really great question. I had this conversation yesterday that I'm curious to know if people are feeling more confident or are they losing patience? And that's something I think is really interesting. Some people may feel confident that, hey, we've managed this well. We're ready to move forward. Feel more safe now. I think a lot of people have felt more comfortable wearing a mask in public and feeling like they're protecting their neighbors and themselves. But I also think there are just some people that have lost patience and said, I'm going back to what I used to do, and I'll take my chances. Well, that's not good for any of us. The biggest part of this is it may not affect you, but it could affect someone else. And
Right.
That's something that I think is really important. And especially with such a major focus, healthcare being our number one employer as an industry in our community, we can't afford for our community to get sick. So I think from a psychological perspective, I think it's a little bit of both. But I would say, I'm an optimist in the sense of the word. And I think that more people are confident that we're going to come out of this than not. But I don't know if there's a consensus on when that's going to be. I think everybody's hoping, June and July, we're going to get back to some normalcy. But, this will be a new normal. So I'm not sure what it's going to look like yet.
Yeah. A couple of things you just mentioned I want to touch on. You mentioned, Mask the City, which I think is a really great project. When I heard about the project, the first thing I did was I actually sent a text to the mayor, Alan Join. I said, Alan, are you considering and making sure that folks in East Winston and folks who are from under-resourced communities have access to these masks? And so when we talk about having access, it means that you got to have distribution centers where people can go to and get the mask. So I was really pleased when we decided to have one of the distribution centers near campus over by Bowman Gray. I happened to go over today when we were distributing those masks, and it was great. One, just being out, and it was great that our athletic department decided to participate and be volunteers for that event. Mark, they were so glad just to be out. They hadn't seen one another, in 45 days, and they were glad to be social distancing and being out distributing those masks. Now, interesting thing happened to me while I was out. That somebody found out that I was at the site, and so they wanted to come and meet me, and they wanted to bring their kids to take a picture with me. They knew I was at the site. Now here I am This is one of the few times that I've been out in about 45 days. And I know that at some point we got to get back to normal and we got to start doing normal type things. So the question before me now is, do I take a picture with these folks or do I not take a picture? But what was cool about this, Mark, is the mother said, I'm a nurse, I have my kids, they have masks on, I've taken care of every precaution that I know of. Will you take a picture with my children? And I had to think about it, but I ended up saying, I think that's the thing to do. I had my mask on. I had, so I mean, just an interesting kind of being out today and being in that space, but also having an opportunity to be a part of that process, making sure that we can get distribute masks to every one of our citizens, and that's what we want to do. So that was important.
Yeah, Chancellor, I think it's a question that's coming up to everyone about, how do we act now? And we met somebody the other day for a site visit. We were masked, and you say hello, and you're 6 feet apart, and so you don't know if you're going to give them an air high five or what are we doing here? Trying to learn, but people are, I think, getting a little more comfortable to it. And you touched on something, just seeing some folks that and seeing some faces, and getting to see some of your friends and coworkers just uplifts your spirit a little and fills you in. And let me say about Mask the City, which was really great to be a part of. The first 60,000 masks off the production line were designed to be distributed and were distributed to those that are in most need in our community and most vulnerable. The first 60,000, and they were done for free through a lot of great programs like the Ministers Conference, Love Out Loud. Obviously, you guys participated in the distribution. But you said something, Chancellor, that I think for those watching in different communities, you can just text the mayor, and that's what's special about Winston-Salem, right? You just send a text and, hey, we're on it, and you make a difference right away. And that's something that's special, and that doesn't happen everywhere. And I think that's great leadership by your team to be participating in the distribution today. But it was also just really uplifting to be able to see people get some protection and help keep their families safe. It's really important.
No, Mark, it was great being out. I mean, I was just driving, just did wonders for my heart. I am concerned, Mark, about what's happening and want to get your take on how you feel the city, the county, the state, the federal government, how responsive have they been in this situation? And what is your assessment of their efforts to help us and keep us going?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a tough one. I mean, I think what has been hard for me is to take a step back and give our elected officials some grace and say they've never done this before, and none of us have ever gone through this before, and that's been tough to see. I would say, for example, I was on a call this morning with all of our commissioners are in every city in our county was on that call, representatives or mayors, and they're talking about unified messaging. How are we going to help our businesses get reopened safely? You had the top two doctors from Novant and Wake Forest Baptist Health from their infectious disease side, Dr. Priest and Dr. Ohl, on that call, and there was a unity in the local area to say, how are we helping? Whether it's in Louisville, Clemens, Kernersville, Winston, across our county, what are we doing together? I think that's been really something that has hit home to me and been impressed by on the local side. Now, our local side is, the flow of money coming from the federal government down has been different and slow. And I think, just to be honest, I think they're doing their best, but I think the PPP program, the Payroll Protection Program, came after the CARES Act. And what we're starting to see, Chancellor, is that some of those folks that were laid off during the CARES Act in order to help receive their stimulus or additional unemployment benefits, some of our employers that have now gotten PPP loans, especially restaurants, are reaching back out to hire their old employees. And some of those folks are saying, I'm making more on unemployment right now than I would going back to work. So I'm in a tough spot here, and I think unfortunately that was something that was not really thought through all the way, and maybe an unintended consequence there to help some of our business owners get back open and get their employees back. So I would say from a state or federal level, they've got to figure out a way to try to allow people to do both, and not try to make them make that decision that would be detrimental to their family. We want it to help our families and our community. So I think that's been interesting. I also think, you talked about the equity piece earlier. I think the PPP loans, the first wave wasn't enough, and it wasn't distributed maybe equally, and our banking system was kind of overrun, if you will, with so much need. So I think round two of that went a little better. Our federal government earmarked some money specifically for community banks. So there were some smaller banks that were able to now participate in the loan program that I think helped some more businesses. And now we're starting to see some money coming into the county, and hopefully to the city as well, that will allow for some other programs to go through. So that's something I think will be really important as we continue to go.
Yeah.
And I had a
Mark,
little
how
internet
important has it
problem, so
been
hopefully
to
that didn't
have?
catch up too bad. Hopefully.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll make it work somehow. But one of the things that's wanted to ask you, how cool is it to have all these healthcare entities, to have Winston-Salem State University School of Health Sciences, to have Wake Forest, to have all of these wonderful medical centers and systems in place in Wake Forest, I mean in Winston-Salem. How important has that been to helping us manage the crisis? I think about this region, and I think that we've done a very good job because we've had so many great partners, but so many of those partners have been in the healthcare industry.
Yes, you're exactly right. I mean, if you just stopped and thought for a second, what would we look like if we didn't have the programs from the university, from your program, from Wake Forest University, from Tech, continuing to push students from their healthcare field, and then two healthcare systems. We're really blessed to have two healthcare systems. And I think what's been really good about this is we have a talent pool here, and our healthcare systems were strong and ready, and to have them both here making decisions, and that they can communicate with each other and agree on things and find ways to work together in this. There's competition in the market, don't get me wrong, and that help, in my opinion, that competition benefits us as citizens. There's a race for facilities and the best doctors and the best nurses and the best everything else, and that helps us. But also in this time when they can get together and communicate, I feel confident in saying it wouldn't be the same situation, and we wouldn't have handled this as well if we didn't have this great healthcare industry right here in Winston-Salem that many of your students are building through your, again, number one ranked, let me get this right, RN to RSN and
RN,
BRN program. PS, I'm close.
RN to BSN.
PSN again, RN to PSN, but number one ranked again. I got my facts right. I just got to
You
get
got the number
better.
one.
Got to get better on the acronyms. I'll get better on that.
You got to be. I'm gonna get you out of here in a few minutes, but I'm gonna get you out of here with how last week's guest, when I had Carl Amato, I had Carl on, and I asked Carl, what does it look like on the other side? So on the other side of this, Mark Owens, what does Winston-Salem look like?
It's going to be different. I think that's first and foremost. But I think what I'm excited about the most is that our community is going to embrace each other more. And I think most importantly, we're not going to take for granted anymore the ability to walk down the street and visit stores and be in a wonderful place. And, I think everybody takes that for granted a little bit. I drove through downtown today, Chancellor, and it just felt good to roll the window down and be downtown and ride through the community and see it. and you look around and you miss seeing people out there. And there's so many days where I'm driving and talking on the Bluetooth phone to be safe, right, while we're driving, and then not pay attention to what's going on. So I think from a community standpoint, hopefully we're going to embrace each other more as one community, number one, first and foremost. And I think what that will also allow us to do is to adapt in the business community. I do think our healthcare industry is going to continue to grow. I think we're going to have more startups. I think we're going to have less people in offices. I think our office space is going to change. I think people are going to want to stop having as many people into the smallest space possible for offices and be willing to expand their square footage to have more space for their employees to work and work differently. So I think that's going to be important. I think we're going to continue to look at connectivity and where our next wave of development is going to be in our community, and see where, we're about out of industrial buildings, where the next one's going to go. How does Salem Parkway connect into 52, connect into the new Beltway? I think will be interesting. But I think it's going to be a tough question to really answer. I'm excited to see what it's going to be. I think I'm on the optimism side here. I think people are going to start really getting back to what we do best and have a sense of appreciation of our community after this. That will make our character continue to grow and be stronger. And then whatever the business line is, from my perspective on the business side, when people are believing in their city and believing in their community to overcome things and take the next step, amazing things are going to happen. And that's the way I look at it.
Fantastic. So take us out. Tell our viewers what can they look forward to from Greater Winston-Salem, Inc.
Yes, sir. New website, winstonsalem.com. We've just relaunched that. We're going to have new interactive videos. We had some scheduled. We've got to have you in our third installment, Chancellor. You've got a viral dancing video we may have to get a cameo of in the next one. Greater Winston-Salem Inc., we're going to be focused on economic mobility. We're going to be focused on embracing our startup community. And we're going to be focused on being the best economic development entity in the south side of this and eastern side of this country, and maybe the entire country. We're going after it. I mean, there's a high bar, and we're going to go for it. And our community is ready for it. And quite frankly, we got everything we need to succeed. And it starts with the people. And so out of Greater Winston-Salem Inc., you're going to see energy, forward thought, and togetherness to take us to the next level as a community.
Oh, fantastic. Look, I know there were some exciting things real quick where businesses were very much interested in wanting to come to Winston-Salem. During this time, during this pandemic, has that pretty much been put on hold, or are we still aggressively pursuing folks to come?
Aggressively pursuing. Some have paused. We had 2 new project visits in town last week looking to come here. In some of those areas like food distribution, as we talked about. People are still identifying Winston-Salem as a great place. The decision process is a little slower. A lot of people don't have the ability to really project their capital needs as they go forward. There's some companies, we did our first virtual visit, some companies that have travel bans. So we're setting up, how we can showcase inside of an office with a 360 camera. We're looking at how can we do utilizing video or utilizing recorded tours through town. How can we do some visits virtually? So we're adapting. We're coming up with that and finding ways that we can turn this negative into a positive in terms of finding new ways to reach out to businesses that are looking at our community. So we're aggressive on it. We're building our team. And we're gonna get after it, Chancellor. That's the only way we know how to do it.
Man, great conversations. Man, I might have to have you back. We didn't even touch on arts and entertainment and all the other things that are happening. There's so many things that are happening in Winston-Salem, and we hope that on the side is nothing but good things. And I thank you for your leadership, and thank you for taking the time to be on Future Focus now.
Well, I appreciate it. Like I said, Chancellor, it's an honor to be able to call you a colleague and a friend, and to be able to be on this show with you. as we focus on the future, I think hopefully part 2 of this, we can be sitting across from each other one day soon, and be able to do that as we talk about all the other great aspects of our community. And like I said, I appreciate this and your leadership and your kind words and your support. And we appreciate what all that Winston-Salem State University does for Greater Winston-Salem. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for being our guest tonight. And join us next week for a very special edition of Future Focus. Now, the great Stephen A. Smith, one of the more recognizable voices in this country, First Take ESPN, Winston-Salem State University grad, will be here live in the studio with us. No, he's not going to be with us, but he's going to be live on Future Focus next week. Join us. You don't want to miss that.